This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is December 18th, 2025.
I'm Scott Luneboom.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. On today's show, a special holiday interview that we recorded last week. Well, actually, right now I'm lying about what today is, but we're releasing this on the 18th. With journalist Rod Mickleburgh on his new book, John Horgan, in his own words. And, special programming note as well. After this interview, we're going to be on break for a couple weeks. So Happy New Year. Happy holidays. Enjoy the time off. We'll see you in January. And support the show, patreon.com/politicos. Well, joining us this week is Rod Mickleburgh, would you say co-author of the new book, John Horgan, in his own words?
Well, people call me a co-author. I kind of, I don't know what quite the right word is, because I don't feel like I'm the co-author. It's all John's words. It's all his voice. But of course, I did all the interviews, and because sadly he left us before we could really get going on putting the book together. All the decisions were mine, and I put it into the form that it appears. And so you use what term you want, but I don't think I'd quite describe myself as a co-author. John Horgan as told to John Horgan with good old me. But I don't want to be too modest about it. I mean, I worked hard to do it, and I'm pretty proud of the way it turned out.
Yeah, I'm eager to get into some of that nuance. But for what we know that you are is former labor reporter for Vancouver Sun and Province, senior writer for the Globe and Mail. You've helped co-author the Dave Barrett.
I was a co-author on that book.
Yes, that was not written by Barrett himself.
No, it was Jeff Meigs and myself.
Yeah, and just generally interested, I think, in labor history in the province, which I find fascinating as well.
Yeah. I've written the book on BC labor history, and as I tell people, I'm so old. I used to be a labor reporter, because, of course, there are no labor reporters anymore.
There's not even a labor minister anymore.
Well, we don't really.
Federally.
Federally. Yeah. They changed the name of it. It's very disheartening to someone like me who I just loved covering the labor movement. I felt very fortunate.
So let's start with the book itself and how it came to be. You mentioned it's in John's words, but it was published posthumously. You describe it a bit in the introduction. That is your words, as I read it.
Yeah.
What is this I read? Like, where did these words come from? How did you get him?
Well, it started out with a series of interviews done at Royal Roads University in 2023. This was just after John had severed all his political ties. He resigned as premier earlier, and then he stepped down as an MLA. So he was rooting around for something to do. The job offers weren't exactly flowing in. And he was, to his credit, of course, he was volunteering at his local food bank, swamping on the food truck. That's the kind of guy he was. But I think he was interested in some sort of a legacy, and others were. And it just sort of, I wasn't quite privy to how it all came together, but he wanted to get something on record, and others encouraged him to do so. And so Royal Roads University in Victoria offered to host a bunch, 2 full days of interviews with John on his term as premier, and they recorded it. They had cameras there, and I was chosen to do those interviews. And I approached them basically as a reporter. I did a lot of research. I pressed them on issues, and there's lots of meat there and a lot of controversial issues. And we spent 2 days doing that. And really, John was in fine form. He was anxious to talk about all the issues and his time as premier, including the tough issues. And at the end of it, we thought, well, this is all pretty good. Nothing had been decided. That people weren't really talking seriously about a book, but people then started to. And I should say, at one point, John, maybe this is even what started it all. He was approached by a literary agent, John Pierce, who said, "Are you interested in a book?" A sharp literary agent there, and I'm not quite sure what John said. He certainly didn't embrace it, but it didn't. The idea didn't go away. And so then we thought, well, we've really got some good stuff here. And John's pretty candid and it's pretty articulate. And I think people would find it interesting. So we made an approach to Harbor Publishing, a proposal, and they said, yeah, let's go. And so we signed contracts to do a book. And at that point, we'd only covered the 5 years John had spent as premier. So there was a lot of material to go over. And a lot of, his early life and his time in politics in the back rooms of the NDP, his time in opposition, 4 terms that he absolutely hated. And so we started to fill in the blanks, so to speak. But by then, he'd been appointed ambassador to Germany by Justin Trudeau, and he was in Berlin. So we did these sessions by Zoom. We did 7 sessions, starting right at the beginning. And they were excellent. And then John got another cancer diagnosis, his 3rd. This was thyroid cancer. And I got an email from him saying, well, he called them our gab sessions. Our gab sessions will have to come to a halt. I don't know what's going to happen. And so they did come to a halt, but we still had stuff to cover. And so it was a bit of a blow. But of course, your first thought is with John. But we didn't know where it was going to go. And then about 2 months later, I got an email from him that said they'd fixed him up with some tubes and so on. And so he could actually talk. And he said, I don't sound like Stephen Hawking. So that was good. And his sense of humor was intact. And so we resumed our Zoom sessions. And he was sitting up in his hospital bed in Berlin. And he was a bit short of energy, and actually not that much. He was fine, but his voice was a little paler, or not quite as vigorous. But the sessions went really well, and we did four more sessions. And as he said, we're not going to be able to talk as long as the previous sessions. Maybe not so much about sports. Well, we got to talk something about sports, because a lot of he loves sports, and so do I, and we kind of bonded over sports. And then came the really tragic news that his cancer had spread, and there was basically no hope for him, and our recordings came to an end. The last one was, I think, October 2nd last year. And remarkably, though, by then, we pretty well filled in all the blanks, and it was pretty complete. There wasn't that much more to cover. So we had to digest that news. But, from my point of view, from both our points of view, the book was pretty well finished. At least all the areas had been covered that we wanted to cover.
So were you pulling it together kind of as just like a string of anecdotes saved into like folders on your computer that you then had to like go in after and piece together, or was he kind of seeing the book to come together with you?
No, I hadn't started anything. We were going to work on it together. The way we're going to do it is I was going to put together drafts, and then he was going to look at them and say, well, I don't like this. I want to say that. Maybe I'd like to say a bit more about that. So I hadn't even started that. But so then it was, when he passed, it was all left to me to put together the transcripts of all our sessions, including the Royal Road sessions, into book form, and arrange it chronologically in chapters, and decide what to leave in and what to leave out. And it was tough, because I couldn't go to John and say, did you really want to put this in the book? Or maybe you should want to talk more about that, and so on. And I had to make those decisions myself. And but I always kept in mind, I could hear John's voice in my head, that it was John's voice and the way he talked. And he was a great talker. He loved talking about his life. He loved talking about the issues, and So it was really like having a beer with somebody, for a very long beer, or maybe more than one. And so that was a huge advantage. I mean, it flowed, right? That the material was there, but it just had to be organized into book form, and that's what I undertook to do. And I think people seem to think that the book's pretty good.
Is there
Because it's John, it's John. It's not me. It's John, and he was a much beloved figure. And as they say, he was he tells his stories well. He deals with the issues well. He's clear. He's funny. There's a lot of the book's a good read. It doesn't really bog down much.
Is there anything you wish you, in particular, that you could have gone back and asked him about, or got a little more clarification on, or just insight?
Well, yes, of course. I'm not even sure I can be that specific, but some of the stuff I took out when he was pretty hard hitting. The people that he called dickheads will remain between John and I, because the discretion. I felt discretion was the better part of valor sometimes, but for all I know, John would have said, "No, I really want that in the book. That guy really is a dickhead."
He probably would have supported keeping it all in. I know, because you did keep in the stuff about Kennedy Stewart, at least, and maybe one or two others.
There may have been a few words that aren't in the book about Kennedy Stewart. So he didn't like Kennedy Stewart.
But this is the toned down version we got.
Yeah, no, and you don't want to pretend that he liked Kennedy Stewart. He didn't, right? And he had no time for him, to be frank. But the thing is that I learned this as a print reporter, is that you can say one thing in a conversation or even in a radio interview, but print is permanent, So something you say about somebody, it's there forever. It's not just, oh, you should have heard what he said about so-and-so, and they play a YouTube clip or something like that, and people are shocked. But, and print is different. And so we would have had those conversations, because I remember one anecdote he told about somebody which wasn't very flattering. And I said, John, well, that won't be in the book. And he said, no, put that in the book. It's not in the book, and it shouldn't have been in the book. And I won't tell you what it is. Sorry about that. But I mean, I would have definitely tried to talk about it, putting that in the book.
I was going to say, that gets into one of the questions I kind of had, is how, your commitment to, or your career as a journalist fed into this understanding and how to approach it, because obviously John has the story he wants to tell and the spin he has on it. But how do you both keep it an entertaining light read, which it absolutely was, while also keeping it grounded in reality, keeping it true, and pushing back on, and clear, and pushing back on some of the maybe spin, as well as the obvious fact checking and stuff.
Well, yeah, we've subsequently found we have a few minor facts wrong. I tried to fact check it as much as I could because his memory wasn't perfect, although it was pretty darn good. And I mean, that's an interesting question, because I had a lot of experience as a journalist. And one of the things I always try to do as a journalist, I love telling stories, but I felt how I wanted the reader to feel a flow in the story. I wanted it to flow with a good lead, and then the right word used at the right time and stuff. And it's sort of the art of writing a news story. It's more than just he said, she said, and then something happened. And I feel that art is lost these days, because you have to file to social media, and you don't have the time to craft your story. But I always believed in crafting my story. I had a reputation at the Globe. Sorry, this is becoming more about me, but I had a reputation as the Globe from among my editors as one word Mickle, because I would call up and say, I really want to change this word to this, because I felt that the story would flow better. So I had that sense of how words should be put together and should flow. And so when I was putting John's words together, I wanted to maintain a rhythm. I didn't want it to bog down. I wanted to move smoothly. And, he was such a great talker that he really helped that process. But I really worked hard at that. And I think my background as a journalist and knowing what a news story is and what is news and what people might want to read, I think that played into the book. And I think that's, I have to give myself a bit of credit for that.
One thing I'm curious about, those gab sessions you mentioned, what were they like? Is it a very formal, you're going through everything, or was it a lot of kind of free-formed discussion that kind of went everywhere that you later had to piece together into a more coherent narrative?
They were not formal, these gab sessions. As I say, we'd start off talking sports, right? And then he'd say this and that and have some candid opinions on what was happening in the world and all that sort of stuff. And we really, these are the Zoom sessions we did from Germany. And but it's interesting that the sessions we did at Royal Roads that started it all off, when I was interviewing him on his time as premier, they were more formal. For one thing, it was being recorded and it was being videotaped and so on. So it was really, I felt that it was these were formal interview sessions. I mean, it was still lighthearted to a sense, but they were pretty good interviews. I have to say, but when we started in Germany, like he's talking about his early life. Well, he loved his life. He loved his early life. He loved talking about it. So there's no issues to press him on there. Other say, "Oh, I want to know more about that." And so we really enjoyed it. And I would say, "Oh, John, this was really great." He says, "Yeah, the point is to have fun, and he enjoyed them too, because as I keep saying, he loved to talk about his life, and he had lots of good stories, and he loved telling jokes. He loved repeating his one-liners that he'd used 100 times, but he still liked telling them. So they were pretty good, even when he was in his hospital bed. We still enjoyed our sessions, and we didn't shy away from, serious issues also. Let's be clear. I mean, his times in opposition, which he absolutely hated. He was no fan of Christy Clark, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it wasn't all laughs. He wanted to say these things about those times. And but we enjoyed it. I mean, I just feel so fortunate that I had a chance to get to know John like that. And, you come away, I really miss the guy. And we kind of bonded in a good way. But I never lost a sense of the fact that we were having a good time. Who cares? I mean, who cares? What's important is what's in the book, right? And I didn't let that get in the way of the book.
Did you have a relationship with him before the Royal Roads interviews? Like, had you interviewed him regularly, or? No.
Yeah. I retired by the time I retired from the Globe in 2013, but we knew each other because, for one thing, Jeff Meigs, his chief of staff, was basically one of my best friends from university, and so he would know me through that, and I would know him through that. But also, when I wrote my BC Labour history book, John came and spoke at the launch. So that was really terrific to have the Premier of the province speaking at your book launch. And there were a lot of people there that were NDP. So, I mean, it was a good audience for him. But he did that. And of course, we certainly got to know each other through that. But we weren't friends. We just, if we ran into each other, we'd be glad to see each other. Hi, how's it going? And then just move on. I mean, we weren't in any regular touch at all. Just we knew of each other. We liked each other. And that was sort of it.
So unless Scott wants to ask any more of the process or overarching questions about the book, we could probably move into...
Let's get into the meat of it.
John himself. So kind of going through the book, I found, and Scott will have to jump in with clarifying questions. He hasn't had a chance to read it, unfortunately. He's
Scott,
down in
come
Reno.
on.
He's down in Reno, in Nevada. They don't have access in the States to quality literature anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately, the availability here is a little sparse. And
you should have bought it before you went down there.
Well, that was before the current craziness here, so it's been
anyway. Sorry.
That.
No, we're off topic, obviously.
Next time he's back, you'll get it.
Yeah.
But you start off in John's early life, and it's fascinating, right? John was never secret that he was raised by a single mom. Right. But I think what was really fascinating for me was his whole like arc through school, how he was never the high achieving, oh, this is the kid who's going to go on to be premier. He was kind of the... Yeah, why don't you describe it? What was John's high school life?
Well, actually, his high school life eventually led to that kind of person, but it didn't start out that way. He was very resentful. His mother remarried, and it really had an effect on John. He wasn't a fan of the person of his stepfather, and he started to fall off the rails, so to speak. I think he described it as, I started to go into the ditch. And he started missing school. He started smoking dope, hanging out, and he was failing his classes and this kind of thing. And he just, he was not in a good space. He wasn't happy. And he started dating this girl, and she was she played basketball. And John was pretty athletic. In his stature and stuff, he was fairly large and so on. And so he thought, oh, I'll take an interest in basketball too. This may have been in grade 10. And the basketball coach turned out to be one of those coaches and teachers that have an enormous impact on a person's life. And that was Jack Lusk. And he saw something in John that he thought was worth salvaging. And it worked. He worked with John. He imparted life lessons to him about, it's not about you, it's about the team, and so on. And he got John back on track, so to speak. John ever afterwards has always thanked Jack Lusk, his basketball coach, for taking an interest in him and basically salvaging him. Plus the principal of the school too, but he talks most about Jack Lusk, and he became a pretty good basketball player, but he wasn't the best. But he learned that you don't have to be the best; you have to play for the team and forge, relationships and so on. And you need a guy that will go up and down the court, not just to be the big star, but the grinders too. And by the end of his high school, he was the class president. And so on. He was getting good grades, and he could go to university. And he really credits Jack Lusk with putting him on the road to the straight and narrow.
Yeah, I found that anecdote really interesting, right? That idea that he was never the star of the team, but he was the guy who was able to bring things together in his life and turn the team around and really emphasize the teamwork, right?
Yeah, he's one of those guys that say there's no I in team, Yeah. It's a cliche, but he really believed that the team is not about me, it's about we, or it's about us. And he took that to politics too. That was a life philosophy for him.
That struck me a little bit, because I would say his premiership, he also saw that come through quite a bit in how he ran the government. Would you not agree?
I agree. I think he appointed people to his cabinet, and he let them run with it. But he wasn't hands off entirely. He knew what was going on, and he would step in, and if he needed to get somebody in behind closed doors and lay it on the line. He wasn't, a hands off premier. He would do that. But I think that was most prevalent and obvious during the COVID pandemic, when you didn't see John Horgan out there at every press conference the way you always saw Doug Ford or some of the other premiers, Jason Kenney and so on, and as John describes it in the book, he said there would be Doug Ford talking about the latest thing that the government was doing or what had happened, the latest development. And there were all these people in masks standing behind him like totem poles. You never knew who they were or anything, but they were all standing there with Doug Ford at the podium. But John basically stayed away from that and allowed Bonnie Henry and the health minister, Adrian Dix, to be the two spokespeople for the terrible pandemic. And every now and then, if there was a big policy decision to be announced or that kind of thing, or he wanted to lecture people that weren't obeying the restrictions, he'd come out and do that. But basically, he left it to Adrian and Bonnie Dix. He was kept up to date behind the scenes and everything. He just didn't let them do what they wanted. And sometimes he would object to something they did. But by and large, they were the front people for the pandemic. And he didn't want to be the front person. He thought they're the people that know what they're doing. let's let them go. And that's a pretty unusual stance for a premier. It's not all about me. It's about my team.
That's one I think that worked really well, because whenever you saw John Horgan come out on one of those press conferences, everybody sat up straight and really paid attention. It put a pretty strong emphasis on whatever was being announced.
He picked his spots. Yeah. And it really worked well. And I think, it wasn't perfect. And, no one had ever dealt with anything like this before. But by and large, I thought BC's response to COVID was pretty darn good.
So he was able to really trust Adrian Dix specifically, I think, because he'd worked so closely with him and developed a relationship over his career. I think you recount that it's Adrian Dix who talked him into running for office in the first place.
Well, yes and
right?
no. It's another one of those Horgan anecdotes he loves to tell, because Adrian Dix, this after the NDP got so clobbered in 2001, ended up with only 2 seats. But the next election was coming up in 2005, and Adrian, and they were very good friends because they'd first met in Ottawa as young backroom political guys from BC, and they were really, really quite good friends. And they'd meet all the time, and Adrian would say, are you running? Are you going to run in 2005? And John really wasn't interested in competing in electoral politics. He'd gone into the private sector very successfully with a communications firm consultancy, and he was enjoying that. And so the way he tells it, that's quite funny. And when you think about what's happened to the latest BC Ferries decision. Anyway, Gordon Campbell had announced that they were going to build the latest new BC Ferries in Germany. And Horgan was outraged at that. And he's ranting away at the TV about what a dumb decision that was. Why isn't it being built, these ferries being built in BC? And his son had a garage band, and the drummer, they were over there. The drummer came out to the kitchen to get some food, raid the fridge or whatever. And he heard John ranting away at the screen. And he said, what are you mad about? What are you ranting about? And Horgan says, well, Gordon Campbell's done this really stupid thing. And the high school kid says, well, what are you going to do about it? And John blurted out, well, I'm going to run for office. That's what I'm going to do. And you're going to help me. And that's what happened. And so he sought the nomination. I mean, obviously, without the prodding and encouragement of Adrian Dix, he wouldn't have even considered it. But according to John, it was this one event where his son's friend came in and challenged him to do something. And John Riley, I think, John C. Riley, his name's in the book. And that's why, John loved those kind of anecdotes. Yeah. And the rest is history, because he did get involved in politics without really any experience in running, and was successful.
I was going to say, and it was during that time before politics that he got really interested in, I'm just trying to remember because I haven't read it for a couple of months, but that was when he got into resource policy, right? Because he worked for the Columbia Power, got really involved in that, and during his time in government he was in mining and in the resource sectors, right? He was
known as one of the, what's it called, the dirt ministry, resources and energy and all that, and he became a real expert in that, and he really enjoyed it. One of the things about John is he was ever curious. It's one of his strengths. He wanted to find out about things. How do things work? I want to talk to people who know a lot about this issue. I want to learn. It's not all about what I think. I want to learn from the people that know. And he became a real expert in energy. And he loved what he did behind the scenes with the Columbia River Trust too. It gets complicated. I won't go into it, but that was a field that he really enjoyed. And I think he was in some ways prepared to continue to do it. It didn't just quite work out, but but he took that expertise with him when he went into government. And but when he was doing consultancy, he was sort of putting that on hold. Mm-hmm. And it came out later when Well, his first, the NDP did well in the 2005 election. In fact, they almost won. Not quite, but it was pretty close. Certainly a lot more than 2 seats. And he expected to be the energy critic, and Carol James, who was the leader then, made him an education critic, much to his surprise. And then he later became the energy critic, and he thrived because he enjoyed it, and he took that into his premiership. I mean, he really shepherded those big resource projects, and he changed the reputation of the NDP for a party that people thought was against everything. He said, no, we don't want to be against everything. We believe in resource development. A good resource project is worth a lot to the province. It brings in revenue. This is the way we pay for social programs, is through revenue we get from resource projects. And as we know, he shepherded Site C and LNG, and both now very successful and controversial within the NDP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how did he manage the internal tensions around those sorts of resource projects and the controversies they stirred up within the NDP?
Well, for one thing, he did oppose the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which was a resource project, and the NDP tried to stop it unsuccessfully. So he had that as a credential. But with Site C, which was the way he handled that was very interesting, because basically the base was opposed to Site C. It almost looked like they'd promised to kill Site C. Remember, Christy Clark had famously said, "I'm going to push this project beyond the point of no return." And so when the NDP got in by that narrow margin, people thought they were going to kill it. And John Horgan said, no, we never said that. What we said was we are going to review it and put it to the people that should be involved in the first place, the BC Utilities Commission, because the Liberals had bypassed the BC Utilities Commission. So they put it to them. And when the BC Utilities Commission came down with their report, they didn't make a decision as to whether to go ahead or to kill it. It's a massive project. But they laid out the implications of the various decisions. And Horgan looked at that and thought, if we kill it at this point, it's going to cost us billions of dollars. And Christy Clark turned out to be right in terms of what John Horgan thought, that they should push ahead because the price of killing it was too much. And plus you get green power, right? You get all that water energy. But what he did was he held a number of sessions with the caucus behind closed doors. He brought in all these experts, and some of them were opponents of Site C, and they canvassed the issue over and over and over again. The caucus members were allowed to ask all the questions, and you got both sides. And so he gave all this information, and he involved the caucus in the overall decision. And they had 3 or 4 of these full sessions with these experts. And by the end, the opposition was sort of slipping away. And by the last session they had, hardly anybody was opposed to it. And so they made the momentous decision to go ahead. And it wasn't a happy decision, because so many, they knew that if it had been up to the NDP at the beginning, they might never have started Site C for all sorts of reasons. But it had gone past the point of no return, and they were going to push it forward. And that's what he did. But he didn't just hand this down from the mountaintop. He involved everybody in the decision, gave them all the information, gave them every opportunity to question the experts on the various implications. And, it's a model on how you make a tough decision in a government, I think. I mean, nobody mentions that when they're talking about the book. They love talking about Horgan and isn't it great and stuff. But that was a serious policy issue. And I think the way he handled that is very instructive.
Yeah, I'm just flipping through the chapter on his time in opposition and thinking about what you're talking about with the challenges in there. And, you already mentioned he didn't like his time in opposition. One of the things that came up...
Hated it.
Well, and one of the things that came up then was, the civil war over Carol James's leadership and the Baker's Dozen. And he resented that group, some of whom were then in his caucus when he formed government, and he had to patch things over with.
That's right.
And so, I'm just trying to think about we'll talk about kind of, what your impression, you say you've emphasized he hated opposition time. And what I was actually trying to find is I swear there was an anecdote where he thought about leaving the NDP for the government to do something.
You're quite right. Your memory's good. In 2013, the NDP was expected to win the election easily with Adrian Dix as leader. They were so far ahead in the polls, it wasn't close. As the province ran a famous front page with a picture of Adrian Dix on it, and he said, "This man could kick a dog and still win the election." I mean, that's how far ahead they were. And Adrian, for whatever reason, ran a disastrous election campaign. And Christy Clark, who's a very good campaigner, I mean, she kept narrowing the gap and narrowing the gap and narrowing the gap. And Adrian just basically, it was a disastrous campaign, let's just say it. And they lost. And Horgan was just so upset. I mean, he couldn't believe that they'd lost this election. And he said, he has a 4-letter word, which I left in the book to describe his reaction. It was the F-bomb. He said,
"You can swear on this show."
Yeah, the F-bomb, 4 more years in opposition, and it just, the thought of that, just, he couldn't stand it. And this is when someone had approached him to, "John, maybe you want to join the Liberals. I mean, we like resource development. You like it. I mean, we like you. We like your style." And he thought about it. And as he said, of course, he he decided not to do it, but he said, "The fact that I was even willing to consider it showed how low I was and how upset I was." And it was really a dark time for him after they lost that 2013 election, and he faced 4 more years of opposition with somebody he didn't have a lot of time for either, with Christy Clark as premier. He didn't. So people thought we need a new leader, but he was absolutely not interested in it. He said, "Look, our time has passed. We need fresh blood. We need young people to lead the party. People like myself and Mike Farnworth and Adrian and so on. Our time has passed." And he really did not want to run for the leadership of the NDP, and really had to be talked into it. It was genuine that he didn't want to run. But finally, he was convinced. And, I think that was one of his, and we know what happened, but I think that was one of his strengths as a politician, is he wasn't ambitious. He didn't seek to become premier. That wasn't his goal. His goal was to do things for people. And he didn't see himself as Premier Timber, and I think he didn't have that huge ego. And I think people sensed that this was a guy that was in politics for the right reason. And I interrupted your question there. Sorry, Ian.
No, that's okay. I think that's something I've gleaned from the book as well. I think the leadership transition and the election was well covered as well by Matter of Confidence, and there's a lot of overlap in that period. So I do want to go back to one thing that also came up in his time in opposition that was quite a positive story, was his riding the bus to the legislature and becoming known as the guy who took the certain bus at the certain time, where if constituents wanted to yell his ear off, John would be on the bus and you could just try and catch his bus.
That shows a measure of Horgan too. You're quite right to bring that up. He really liked people. He liked to engage with people. He took his responsibility as the MLA seriously. He wanted to do a good job for them. And that was one of the things, a major thing he hated about being in opposition, is that he couldn't do anything for his constituents, because you know how it works. The government does most of the stuff for people in the ridings where they have their own elected MLAs. And so he felt badly about that, and he hated the fact he couldn't do anything for them. But, one of the first things he did, he started having town hall meetings. Then he realized they just became a repository for all these cranks to show up to talk about issues they've been talking about for 30 years. But he went to every local event. And so he tells in the book about, he was at one event and he heard this woman say, "Horgan sighting," and then ran off. And he said, what's all that about? And then he ran into her again, and she said she was so embarrassed, but she and her friend have this game where they go to an event, and who can spot John Horgan first at the event, because he was at every single local event, right? And then he started riding the bus all the way to Souk. So he could actually talk to people rather than at town hall meetings. I mean, I've never heard of an MLA or a politician doing that. What could go wrong? About a million things, but they didn't go wrong with him. And he, as you say, he advertised it in the paper, and people knew that they could go and talk to John Horgan on that bus. But it was a rough ride to Souk. The road was not great, and he found out he had to start taking Gravol because he was starting to get nauseous and stuff. And he said, it's not a great vote getter to barf on your constituents. But this was the measure of Horgan, And he even did one or two after he became premier. And then he thought, no, I can't. I've got to stop it. But he really believed in that, and he really believed in engaging with people. And again, that was one of his strengths as premier. People sensed that he was genuine. It wasn't just, I'm pretending I like people. He really did like people.
It's a pretty big transition to become premier, particularly for someone who didn't seem to be aimed that direction through their whole life. How did he deal with suddenly being the person in charge of running a whole province and the myriad responsibilities that came with that?
You know what? He loved it. He loved it. Not because of the power. Well, because of the power, I suppose. But after how many years? 12 years in opposition. Now he could finally do things for people instead of just criticizing the government. He could actually do things for people. His government could do things, and he was very proud of the things that they did, taking the tolls off the bridges, eliminating MSP premiums, giving free tuition to people as they aged out of foster care, things like that, increasing disability payments. Yes, the resources issues got all the big headlines, but these things he really believed in, that he could make people's lives better. And that's why he became, people said, oh, John, you used to be so angry about everything, and now you don't seem angry. He said, this is the real me, the guy with the grin. That wasn't me, the angry John. Although, if I may, I think it was part of him. He was Irish. He had a temper. But, he said it wasn't fundamental to his personality. What was fundamental was the affable John. That's me, liking people. And he was just in a good mood because he felt he was doing things for people. And he just took to it. He surrounded himself by good people. And again, it wasn't his way or the doorway. And he wasn't an ideologue either. He could change his mind, or he liked seeking agreement, even with people he might not share a lot of philosophy with. You find an agreement. He got on well with the business community. He got on well with the other premiers who were very right wing because he looked for agreements. And and maybe he was premier at the right time in his political career, because he'd had a long build-up in politics, in the back rooms, and then as an opposition MLA. And he just took to it, and he was so successful. And he was still, in fact, he was more popular at the end after 5 years as premier than he was at the beginning. And that's pretty well unheard of, because, how many people would say, well, I don't like the NDP, but I like John Horgan. And there was something about him that people sensed that they liked, because he was himself. I think he would say, because I got a chance to be myself. When I was in opposition, I wasn't myself. I was putting on an act, et cetera, et cetera. But when I was premier, I got to be myself.
So I'm conscious of the time, and you've been very generous on this evening when we could be all watching sports or relaxing or otherwise. But maybe to turn us towards the end, I think most of our listeners will know the arc of John Horgan's premiership, but more from the personal angle, right? He goes through 2021, which you title that chapter Annus Horribilis.
Yeah.
Because it was a very tough year for the province between the heat dome and the floods, which unfortunately we're seeing again in the Fraser Valley
although not
as we speak right now. Yeah, thankfully. How do you think his time as premier wore on him. Like, things started one way, then COVID hits, and then crisis and controversy after controversy. Was he just tired by the end, health notwithstanding?
Well, the other thing that happened in that horrible year was that he was diagnosed with cancer again, his second diagnosis, and that took a lot out of him. So, like, it was everything. But I pressed him on this because my sense of it was being premier wasn't fun anymore. I mean, all the not easy decisions, but the kind of popular decisions, or decisions that were there to be made, and they made them. What do you do about an atmospheric river? There's no votes in that, or the forest fires that were devastating the province, or the heat dome. These were not fun issues. But he never really bit on that. He just said, he and his wife, after he recovered from cancer, they went and looked at the otters playing in the sea, the walk in the snow moment, and they thought, maybe it's time. 5 years. And see, this is another thing positive about John Horgan. He wasn't interested in hanging around. You get out at the top, right? And then you leave the province in good shape for someone else, for a successor to take over. And he believed in that. I mean, you got Justin Trudeau and these other politicians that hang on forever. John Horgan didn't believe in that. Turn it over to somebody different, new blood, younger people. I've had my run at it. It was great, but it was time to go. And I think, his cancer, which he recovered from, but it did take a toll. I mean, he just didn't have the same energy that he had before. And to go back to what we were talking about, the issues were complicated. They took more of a strain. They weren't. They were tough issues, and they weren't easily solvable. Some of them weren't solvable. Look at the opioid crisis. No matter what you did, the crisis got worse. Climate change. How do you do your best, but atmospheric rivers and heat domes and forest fires, they're going to keep happening. It's hard to be in government these days. And I think he sensed that.
It's fascinating, right? Because, years ago, we did a Greatest Premier BC contest on this podcast. And I think we got you to actually submit the final submission for why Dave Barrett should win that. And he ultimately did, from our listeners, because
only 3 years, 39 months. So amazing what he did.
Yeah. And I don't think also listeners in 2025 have as much appreciation for WAC Bennett, whether or not they should. But what's fascinating as you go through that is virtually every other premier in BC's history did not get to go out on their own, popular high. Either they missed their shot and, lost an election or got axed by their caucus, or they got voted out, or went down in scandal, right?
Or they resigned when their popularity was ebbing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like John Horgan, uniquely in the province and to some extent in the country, goes out on his own popular high, which is quite the tale to end.
I think you're right. I mean, how often does that happen? It doesn't happen very often. And, what a great decision it was, I think, in a lot, and deliberately so. There was no pressure on him to leave, and he just decided it was time. And it goes back to this thing that I mentioned earlier. He didn't have ambition. He didn't have an ego that he wanted to be premier. He loved being premier, but he also said, I don't want that to be the rest of my life, right? I've got things to do, and I want to spend more time with my wife and that sort of thing. And that was genuine. And I think he enjoyed the challenge of being ambassador for Germany. He didn't get to enjoy it very much, but I think he did look forward to doing something different. And that's rare, Rod, that as you point out, very rare that you leave at the top of your game.
So people should go pick up the book, John Horgan in His Own Words, a memoir, John Horgan with Rod Mickleburgh.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to plug? What are you working on next? Just enjoying your own retirement?
Well, I still do. I do my own podcast. It's not my own podcast. We have a kind of a collective on BC labor history, which I still doing. It's called On the Line, which people can listen to. It's not professional or political or anything like that, but we try to put labor stories out there, and so you're welcome to tune in. It hasn't gone viral by any means. And I just sort of, I don't know, I still am involved in labor heritage. I do the occasional bit of writing and so on. And getting old, But one of the things I'll just say about the book, if you buy the book, it's a good read. I think you'll enjoy it. I mean, you don't bog down. There's a lot of zingers in it. There's a lot of humor in it. There's a lot of serious stuff in it. And it's all in John's voice, and he tells the story well. You'll get some laughs. There might even be stuff you don't agree with him on, but it's a good read, and he's a unique politician. I don't think there's much doubt about that. We'll never see his like again, probably.
I enjoyed the read. It was very smooth flowing, exactly as you describe.
Yeah. So you got something to look forward to, Scott.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it. As soon as I can get my hands on a copy here, I'm going to be digging into that.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Rod. Have a great evening.
Well, my favorite topic, eh? Thanks very much for having me on.
And that has been Politicoast. Find links to everything we talked about at politicoast.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicoast. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicoast is a production of Leg and Boot Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.